Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. The 2025 Kentucky legislative session is underway. Lawmakers are filing lots of bills for consideration. The House has already passed another cut to the state income tax, and the Senate is poised to do the same when lawmakers return on February 4th. Other issues are out there, including proposed anti-DEI legislation, school safety measures, a proposal to lower the age to get a driver's permit to 15, and apparently a request for more NTI days is coming from some superintendents as well. We'll hear from both chambers and both parties today on Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, Democratic State Representative Chad Aull of Lexington, but first, Republican Senate Majority Floor Leader Max Wise is here. Wise from Campbellsville was first elected to the Senate in 2014. He has an interesting background, a professor at Campbellsville University and at UK, and also a former FBI agent who also ran on a ticket for Lieutenant Governor in 2023. Senate Majority Leader Wise, welcome. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks for the invitation, Bill. Good to see you.
And you as well. Do you expect this 2025 session to be productive and to improve Kentucky? I understand you have some measures in place already to try to manage the flow of things.
You know, every session takes on its own identity, so we never know going into it, except for a budget session. But in the shorter 30-day session, which is the one we're currently in, you really never know what's going to happen once you get started. But one of the things we did on the Senate side, and this is mostly for the Senate Republicans, supermajority, is we asked our members to limit the number of bills they file this year to 5. And we did that for a host of reasons. With shorter session, we felt like the intentions of the founding fathers and the framers was it's clean up legislation. It's not about how many bills can you file. It's look at policy. And so far, we've had members stick to that. We've had one member so far get to the 5 allotment. But I really think the pace of that is going to serve us well. It's always not about let's see how many bills we can file, work LRC absolutely furiously through a session. But our House compadres on the other side are not doing that. I think they filed 215 bills so far this session, but it does help with the flow, so we'll see how this session works out.
If it works, do you look to do it in the regular session?
I think we'll have that conversation. We'll see how this goes. Once again, we cannot do anything statutorily to require this, but I think with a gentleman's agreement, we'll see how it goes, and maybe the House wants to piggyback off what we're doing.
You still have to deal with what comes from the House, so there will be lots of things. And one thing is the state income tax that seems on track to be cut to 3.5%. They have passed that in the House. It has passed a Senate committee with recommendation and with a little bit of note of caution from the chairman about going forward. We know that revenue has dropped some, or is projected to. Are you comfortable with the guardrails that are in place if Kentucky passes this next cut?
I have full faith in our House and Senate A&R chairs, Jason Petrie and Chris McDaniel. You know, what we're doing, we're taking a very, not a slow pace, but also a fiscal conservative pace. And what I mean by that, we're not doing like Kansas did, which completely shut the system and shocked it into place. But by having those triggers in place, and once again, we need to tell everybody, a lot of this didn't start until July 1, so we're gradually going to see what this is going to look like over the next foreseeable months ahead. But I've not had a single constituent come to me and say, man, I really wish you wouldn't vote for that. I think we love seeing that state income tax drop, but doing it in a very conservative manner. I think once again, we'll maybe look at next session. If there's revenue measures that we have to look at, we'll always take that approach, but we'll do it in a very cautious way.
There seem to be more caution flags all of a sudden, though. Like this one may be okay, but then the next one might have to wait. Are you hearing that?
I think we'll have to see the forecasting. I think we'll have to see, you know, especially now the Trump administration's into place, anything that happens also on the federal level of what impact that could have here within the state, especially with signature industries that we have here in Kentucky. But I fully have confidence in the path that we're going. And once again, I think we've got good people in leadership. We've also got good budget advisors that are giving us some good advice on this.
Education Commissioner Robbie Fletcher is predicting a $40 million shortfall in SEEK funding for local school districts. There was a lawsuit filed last week by some students who said Kentucky is woefully underfunding public education. Do you have concerns about school funding?
Let me talk about a couple of things.
Yeah.
First, on the SEEK formula. Last year we had a record influx that we put into actual public education for K through 12 in Kentucky. SEEK formula funding is about $2.7 billion is what we did. So we're talking about a 1.47% when we talk about that falling there of what's about $40 million. That's not unusual. And I don't want to raise any red flags, but this is probably the fourth time since 2010 or since 2000 we've seen this happen before.
It's impacted by the rising property values.
That's correct.
Right, so the local amount goes up and then the state has to come in with money.
Absolutely. And we also work directly with KDE. So right now, Commissioner Fletcher, we're having conversations. Our budget staff have seen where this discrepancy in data could have been. We're probably going to let the House take a little bit of a lead on this, because once again, when budget sessions start, they're the ones that generate the revenue bill over to us, and we work off of that. So I don't think it's anything of major concern, because we're going to have those good conversations going forward. Once again, we've kind of risen up and done some things in the past before when we found shortfalls in the past. In regards to the lawsuit, I really can't talk about that because it is an active lawsuit now that's been filed against us. But I want to push back in terms of what we have done as a supermajority Republican Party with K through 12 education. School safety, third grade reading levels, third grade math levels, enhancing teacher salary pay, have given that to local school districts with money we've put back. Full day kindergarten funding. We've done a lot of good things. And other issues, anti-bullying legislation that we've worked on, school safety, as I mentioned, mental health awareness. So there's a lot of good that we've been doing, and I hate to see that a lawsuit like this has kind of detracted the good work that the legislative body's done.
Do you feel good about where we are in Kentucky schools?
I think we always can strive to be better. I think every state needs to strive for education to be better. I look forward to working with Commissioner Fletcher. As you know, the Senate was able to confirm him the first time we've ever been able to do that. I think we need to be innovative. We didn't see the Amendment 2 pass this past election season, but that doesn't mean that priority does not need to be put on education. We're continuing to fund our area technology centers, career pathways for high school graduates. We're doing a lot of good work in this space, and I feel very confident as we go forward. Education is continuing to be a top priority for Republicans.
You're co-sponsor of a bill that says no student or employee of a public college or university will be penalized due to the person's refusal to support a divisive concept. Anti-DEI legislation, in other words. Is the bill necessary after UK removed its DEI programs and some other institutions have followed suit?
That specific bill is from last session. We've not seen the bill been filed this session.
One is coming.
There will be one coming. I've yet to see if it's going to be a House bill or a Senate bill. We're just kind of monitoring that for right now. I think we also need to see what the Trump administration has done in the first hours here that they've been in office. They have already started to target DEI at the federal government level. You started to see agencies like the FBI and the ATF and others already abolishing any kind of DEI that's there at the federal government level. They didn't tie that into those sources of federal dollars to states. So that would have maybe taken care of some of the stuff at the public post-secondary universities. There's been discussions that we saw in our interim. College presidents came forth and said they've made steps and done some things. I think the legislature still wants to see what are those steps, and if there's anything right now in terms of taxpayer dollars that are going towards DEI offices, what really is being done in those offices, how many employees are there in those offices. Because once again, we left last session, there was nothing solved, and that's not unusual. We see a lot of times we leave a session, a bill doesn't pass, doesn't become law, we could come right back and try to tackle it again.
Do you have continuing concerns in that area, though?
Yeah, from constituents that I hear from and myself personally, I think it is an issue that we still need to look at as a Commonwealth. I think this is something that we're seeing, especially at post-secondary. I hear from some professors with concerns. I hear from parents that have students that are at some of our colleges. And I don't know this session if we'll deal with K through 12 with anti-DEI, but I do think post-secondary will still continue to take a look, and we'll see what the legislation, if it has, strength to, or not to pass.
But in other words, legislation that would say what can or cannot be discussed or taught, right?
I'm not necessarily about what is discussed or taught, but maybe so much about training, and especially about contracts that are coming into state universities that are providing training to those schools.
President Trump speaks of returning abortion to the states. There was the ruling by the Supreme Court, and there are both Senate and House bills to provide some limited exceptions to Kentucky's near total abortion ban. Your predecessor in this position, Damon Thayer, told us there were not the votes to pass that. Do you think that remains the case?
We're a pro-life caucus. I don't know right now if this is going to be the session that we're going to take on any issue dealing with abortions or exceptions. I know with the Trump presidency of him getting a popular vote, I don't think that was such a big issue as maybe it was in the past in previous elections. A bill has been filed by the minority party, but I don't think this session right now, I'm hearing any momentum that we're going to move any legislation like that.
There's a bill proposed by Senator Rick Girdler that would require a moment of silence or reflection to start each day. Is that a priority of leadership?
Not necessarily right now a priority. We've not, as leadership, kind of given our 1 through 10 priority bills or anything past that. The bill has been filed. This was also filed previously before. I think you're going to see a lot of education bills also about the 10 Commandments. I think the House has already filed a bill dealing with that, of posting of the 10 Commandments. With the moment of silence, I think it's 60 seconds to up to 2 minutes every day of a moment of silence. In terms of looking at that, I have no problem, of that happening.
When there are those issues that it appears could result in litigation, is that something that lawmakers take into consideration?
Absolutely. We are always looking at other states and seeing if similar legislation is currently in litigation, if it has before, if it's tied up in federal litigation. Many times we'll take a pause on that and say we're just not going to go down that path.
There is a House proposal to lower the age at which young Kentuckians get a driver's permit to 15. How do you feel about that?
I've got 4 children, and I'll tell you, my oldest 3 would have really enjoyed that. I will say it was also a workforce issue. We heard this session, we had a task force on workforce attraction and retention. We heard from one teacher that was her workforce co-op group that said summer employment, sometimes getting kids to work or job placement, was a difficulty at a certain age. But it's interesting to see, I heard a stat the other day, that this young generation right now, only 25% are getting driver's licenses. And who knows in the next foreseeable 10, 20 years if we even have a driver's license or not. Everything's moving so fast in the world we live in. Technology, regulations, everything is just so fast we can't as legislators keep up with it. I do like the bill. I will say I think at 15 that's for the permit, and then you could get the driver's license by 16 and a half instead of 17. Other states around us are fully on board with that. I see that bill probably having some momentum this session.
So with reference to the future, is it important in your view to have some guardrails on artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. Artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, all these things, cell phones in schools. You'll see a lot of bills filed, some from last session, some from this session, just because the sheer nature, when we're only there till March 28th, not back again until January, it's super fast and things are happening so quickly. Artificial intelligence, when we discussed that was a really good task force. We're just trying to get our heads wrapped around it. I'm not sure if 137 of the legislators can define artificial intelligence. But we've got Senator Amanda Bledsoe here from Fayette County that's been working on that issue, and Representative Josh Bryant. I'm looking forward to seeing what they provide for us.
Also from the House, Speaker Pro Tem David Meade is the lead sponsor of a bill to allow EKU to establish a college of osteopathic medicine. It passed the House last year. The Senate put things on pause until there was a study done, a feasibility study. Apparently, that study says EKU is in a good position to do that.
That is correct. I'm on the education committee still, even though I'm in my leadership position, and Deloitte did the study. They gave it back to us, and there's a number of universities right now, Murray State, possibly a veterinarian school, Western Kentucky University, PhD, R2 research programs that they want to establish, Morehead State, PhD, and I think it's astronomy in that area, and the same thing with EKU. We've not had, in terms of advancement of some of our schools, programs such as this, and they've had to continue to come to the legislature to do that. I've had great conversations with President McFadden and some of our other universities. We'll see the direction that goes. I know they're going to start off with the House, and then once it gets into the Senate, we'll have those conversations about which schools that we can foresee in the next years down the road can sustain the expense of some of those programs.
Do you hear pushback from others who don't want those institutions to have larger missions?
There may be some groups that are out there that we may be constituent based, not if particularly in my district, but most legislators, in terms of the momentum last session, there was a lot of push for some of those programs to take shape. And once again, we'll just kind of see, what direction those go, if they're going to be one-off bills, or if maybe we put them all into one omnibus bill and put all of them together.
You're not a sponsor this time, but what is the highest priority that you have for this session?
To continue advancing Kentucky. I think right now we're doing really good work in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I love what we've done with tax reform. I'm also one of these. I want to look at the big 30-year picture, and especially as we go down the path of things for Kentucky. Education has always been a priority of mine from my time as the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. Also being a father and knowing that for the future of this Commonwealth, we need to leave our state in good hands.
Few seconds left. This is a political oddity in Kentucky. President Trump got 65% of the vote here and has won it 3 times. Governor Andy Beshear's approval is pegged at 65% in a recent Morning Consult, and he has won 3 statewide elections. Kentuckians have political interesting leanings, don't they?
They really do. You know, I was able to see on a statewide campaign with Kelly Craft when I was her nominee for lieutenant governor, just what a great state we have and the people that live here. And I think sometimes regardless of party politics, we're all Kentuckians at the end of the day. But President Trump has a huge following, especially when you get into the southern states and others. He's got a really strong base that's there. You know, I think once again, the governor and things that he's doing, I think credit still needs to be given to this legislative bodies of what we've been able to do with economic development and policies here.
Senator, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Leader, I guess you're addressed in Frankfort now, right?
Not at home. My wife says no, but maybe in Frankfort.
Well, we can't speak for that. All right, thank you. We appreciate you. Stay with us now. We'll be back with State Representative Chad Aull. He's a Democrat of Lexington, and it's next on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT as we hear from both chambers and both parties in the state legislature today. Republicans have overwhelming majorities in both the House and Senate. Democrats who hope to pass anything or stop anything have to carefully pick their battles. Democratic State Representative Chad Aull of Lexington is joining us right now. Representative, welcome. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
How do you see your role in the minority in terms of, is it practical to think that you can pass some legislation if it's just right, or are you left trying to moderate what the majority Republicans may be trying to do?
I don't think it has to be one or the other, mutually exclusive. You can do a little bit of both. I was lucky enough in the very first session, this is my third, so my first session I worked with Representative Killian Timothy, and we were actually able to work together to get a bill passed all the way through to the governor's signature that became law. It was in the school safety space. It was there was a quirk in the previous legislation around SROs for school resource officers, where Sheriff Kathy Witt actually called me and said she had a problem that the auditor had a finding that she could no longer supply people off of her staff to be school resource officers in private schools throughout Fayette County. So I worked with Representative Killian Timothy together, and we got bipartisan support, unanimous support, and we got that bill through the General Assembly together, bipartisan. Sometimes it's about throwing out a good idea, getting a conversation started, and people not having considered that idea before. Sometimes you got to hand that over to the majority party and let them help you get that across the finish line. I've got a couple of bills this session that I actually introduced last session.
You think they have a chance?
I think they both have a chance.
Tell me about those.
Yeah, sure. So one of them is now being held and ran by Representative Bratcher out of Elizabethtown. It's around the non-emergency medical transport, and it's how we get people who can't afford to routinely get to their normal doctor's appointments. There's extra federal funding out there, and the way that Kentucky administers that program right now is in a non-competitive basis. So this bill will open that up and allow people who don't have reliable transportation get to their doctor's appointments, maybe across county or out of the region, in a routine manner in a non-emergency medical situation. And that's being ran this time by Representative Bratcher out of Elizabethtown. I've got another one that I sponsored last year, was the Kentucky Proud School Match bill. That was around how we fund school lunches. And so that bill set aside funding for schools to buy locally produced ag products. So it's a win for your local farmers, it's a win for your local economy, it's fresher, it's more healthy, so it's better for the kids. And so that's being ran by Representative McPherson out of Allen County. So sometimes it's about bringing those ideas to the forefront, starting a conversation and finding out who is the best person on the other side of the aisle to carry that bill for you so you can get a real shot at getting it passed.
Do you think ultimately you get the credit when you have to hand it over to a majority member to carry the football?
It shouldn't be about the credit. At the end of the day, we ought to do what we think is right for the citizens of Kentucky, get the legislation passed, make a difference in people's lives, worry about credit later.
There are some concerns about school funding, although the House Speaker is questioning the numbers right now, but the Education Commissioner says there could be a large $12 million shortfall this year. It could eventually reach $40 million. It's the SEEK funding. We also have the fact that a group of students is suing the state, saying that the Commonwealth does not adequately fund education. We've been there before.
Yes.
Do you share those concerns?
Absolutely. Every time we have any kind of funding bill that comes before the General Assembly, the budget last year, the tax decrease this year, I always talk about schools and where we are with the funding. We've been inadequately funding schools for a long time in the state of Kentucky, and we have the funds to do so. We've got nearly $5 billion sitting in the rainy day fund. There's no reason why we cannot be doing more right now today.
So you would call for more money?
Yes, I have.
Non-budget session, go ahead and make a change.
I have and will continue, absolutely.
Do you see plugging this hole if there is a shortfall or doing more?
But we can do both. We can plug the immediate shortfall, out of the rainy day fund, a one-time expenditure to have it there, and even if they don't need it, because to your point, there's some disagreement about whether or not there is going to be a shortfall. Why not have it in place that we don't have to call an emergency session later on in the year? Have it there, have it ready if they need it. If they don't have to tap it. But long term, we need to come back and look at how we're funding SEEK. There's been some talk. There's been talks of standing up a task force to tweak how we look at the SEEK formula. I think all of those conversations have to be had, and it has to be had before we go all the way down to 0% on the income tax.
Well, Representative Aull, the Republicans say, there's record SEEK funding. There is money going to education. They make it a high priority. Do you disagree?
No, but both things can be true. There can be record SEEK funding because of inflation and the cost of everything in life goes up, and at the same time, we're not funding our schools in SEEK near to the level we were back to 2007. We had a group of superintendents come to testify to a small group of legislators last year during the budget session. I'll never forget the superintendent of Madison County had a chart, and if you include inflation, we are millions and millions of dollars behind of where we are to meet the level. So just because we're going up doesn't mean we're going up at the same pace and cost of inflation like everything else is going up.
You mentioned income tax. You voted for this latest cut, which will bring the state income tax down to 3.5%. There were some mentions of revenue falling. We have this potential shortfall in education. You do feel comfortable with your vote?
No, I don't feel comfortable with my vote. When I took that vote, when I talked on the floor about the realities that we have, especially in the minority, as a legislator, we have to make a decision, yes or no, on that bill in front of us, not what we wish were the case. I wish we would do something else. I wish we would give teachers a direct raise, which they deserve. I wish we would raise the minimum wage. I wish we would advance legislation that actually would help working families much more significantly. You could take the 0.5% income reduction and fully fund universal preschool for 4-year-olds and have money left over. That would mean so much more to working families than the 0.5% reduction in the income tax. That's what I wish were the case. That's what I wish I could vote on. But that was not what was put in front of me. So if the only option I had was to help working families do the income tax cut, that's what I was going to go with.
Well, the governor indicates he will sign it. Did that give some Democrats political permission, so to speak, to be for the tax cut?
I'm sure it did, and I'm sure that a lot of people struggle with that. I know myself, I struggled because I agree, long term, we can't go to 0%. 40% of our entire budget comes from the income tax, and so we got to be able to replace that, and we're not going to do that. So there comes a time where we've got to make a decision based on the facts we have right now, today, in front of us, and not what's going to maybe happen tomorrow.
How do you feel about the proposal to lower the age at which a Kentuckian can get a driver's permit to 15?
You know, I've got a young driver in my house. She's 17, and we went through that process. I really enjoyed that time getting to spend with her to teach her how to drive. I'm open to it. I haven't made a final decision on that bill as of yet. I understand that we're kind of behind the curve, that a lot of 30 some odd other states have moved down to the 15-year-old model, so that's something to consider.
Our Jessica Umbro is working on a story with you about another proposal that you have that you say would make it safer around such events as Halloween.
Yeah, the state of Ohio recently passed a very similar piece of legislation. It's modeled after that, would make it illegal for people who have past offenses with minors in the, to not be able to participate in Halloween, pass out candy, go to parties, being dressed in costume, and it's just another tool in a tool belt for law enforcement to deal with that situation.
Is there a particular project or something you want to get done in your district or in Lexington in your time in the legislature?
Yeah, we're talking about transportation. I hear it over and over again. I hear about New Circle Road, I hear about Nicholas Road, Alumni Road, the big roads that are in my district. They're not only, important for specifically my district, but they're the economic corridors for the Commonwealth. So I'm working with the majority party members, my city councilmen, working on what is the most impactful thing we can do for transportation in Lexington today.
A few seconds left. Do you anticipate running for re-election, or do you have your eye on something else?
No, I'm happy where I am. It's real early to be talking about re-election. We just went through that process, but no, I'm happy being in the House.
But it's later this year. You'll have to start the filing process. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Chad Aull is a Democratic state representative from Lexington. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. A reminder, the state legislature will resume its 2025 session on February 4th in Frankfort. Stay with WKYT News on air and online for the latest updates. We thank you for joining us for Kentucky Newsmakers. Make it a good week ahead.